Okay, hello, welcome to our Study Hacks webinar. My name is Dr. Jill Byrne and my colleague here is Dr. Chris Ireland. Today, the theme of the session is exploration. We're exploring different ways in which you can do your studying. So maybe more efficient ways, maybe more effective ways, maybe more creative ways. But the whole idea is to explore maybe different ways of doing things. So maybe trying out new things and doing things in new ways to see if that results in different outcomes. So the whole focus of our session today is upskilling your assignment planning and your research skills. So the aim of this session is to explore mind mapping strategies for assignment planning, which hopefully will give you an introduction to more creative ways of thinking around the assignment tasks you have, your essay questions, your report questions, whatever that may be. I'm going to deliver that first part, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Chris, and he's going to explore search strategies, particularly looking at internet search strategies. So what are mind maps? Mind maps are a visual representation of your thinking. So they allow you to think creatively about the task ahead. So to get ideas out on paper. They're a method of exploring your ideas and exploring the possibilities of how you might approach an assignment, what you might include in an assignment. But they're not random, okay? So you're not like brainstorming and just going blah out on paper, everything. Maps have links. They make connections. They build bridges between ideas. And a visual representation allows you to think about how ideas stand in relation to one another. So, they're an alternative to linear structures. Linear structures are often used in assignment writing, assignment planning. They're often what we've been taught throughout schools and college. And at one level, there's nothing wrong with them. However, they can be very limiting in the way that they allow you to think, in that they can send you down a very straight, narrow path. Introduction, main body, points for, points against, or advantages, disadvantages, conclusion. And we can get stuck in these linear structures. However, rather than one fixed path, there are usually many different options and lots of different paths that you can travel on. So how do mind maps help you then? They can free up your thinking from those linear structures that can be limiting. They can allow for further exploration. They can allow you to think wider. They can allow you to make connections and relationships across and between ideas, and for you to visually see those connections. You can think wider, you can explore possibilities, and then because you can see this mapped out visually, you can refine more effectively. You can also then assess and evaluate the ideas that you've visually set out before writing, and you can move things around. And you can do all that before you start writing. And you can also assess the limits of your knowledge. So once you've seen everything, all that you know, all that you've got out there on paper, you can start to decide what you know, what you need to know more about, and you can create a research and a reading plan. So how do these mind maps work then? Let's have a look at some examples. So I'm going to show you some real examples. These are examples that were created by students. So this is a plan for an essay. It's a 3,000-word essay, undergraduate. Management and managing are characteristically gendered in many respects, that should say. And that was the starting point, that was the starting quote for an essay, and the student was required to evaluate that statement. So does gender, does whether you're male or female, influence the opportunities you have in terms of reaching high levels within an organisation and managing? And so this student starts to think about these ideas and thinks, well, okay, the first stage of gendering is actually in education, right from the start of education. So why is this stage important? Career options on gender, statistics, factors influencing gender segregation in the workplace. So horizontal structures, vertical structures, men top of the hierarchy, more men in management roles. There's many theories about that. Women equal informal networks, perhaps more so than formal networks. Part-time work, full-time work. Why gender differences exist, biological differences. Women are more likely to take a break from work to have children than men. But there are structural differences, there are socialization differences. And so you can see this student mapping out her ideas, and then these arrows are showing the connections between ideas. She's building those roads, those paths, making those connections and building those bridges and getting lots of ideas out on paper here. And you can see there are all sorts of ways in which she could go with this assignment and where she might do some more reading. Here's a different one, looks different. Same sort of question or topic area, sex and power. Is it possible or impossible to work full-time and combine family duties? So this is about work-life balance, but it's also about gender, because family duties may well be different for men and women. So again, the student starts to think about the ideas. Okay, what's today's picture in terms of empowering women, feasibility, market innovation, question of income living costs? What's the limitations of this development? Discrimination, pay gap, different skills, part-time or de-skilled jobs. Who's more likely to be working part-time and in de-skilled jobs, men or women? Who's more likely to be doing domestic and childcare duties? Working culture. Is there a focus on mothers? What about men? Is their role changing? Is paternity leave and paternity responsibilities, both socially and legally, changing? Okay, what's the legislation then? Okay, so again, ideas, arrows, creating a map around this subject and this topic, but thinking widely. Now, this particular student used this as a plan. She then did her reading, she then did her writing, and then when she came to edit her assignment before finally handing it in, she went back to her plan, and she used this map to help her edit, check, and evaluate what she'd written. And she could see that perhaps the weighting of what she was writing about was a little bit off, and she needed to change it. She'd got way too much stuff on legislation, not enough on the roles of women and working culture and so on. So she could see that she needs to do some tinkering. And so this map acted as a guide throughout the whole process for this student. Okay, so let's have a go at a mind map. Let's try one. Here's a question. Critically evaluate the causes and consequences of global decline in bee populations. So I've highlighted causes and consequences in red because there's two elements to this question. And when you get a question like that, you need to make sure that you cover both aspects and you equally weight perhaps both aspects. It can be tempting to just focus on one aspect and then forget the other. So what do I know about declining bee populations? I know what I've seen in the media, I know what I've read in newspapers, I know what I've heard, I know that the chemicals that are used in agriculture are a problem. I know that there are other causes. I know that people talk about different ways of farming, large farms, the reduction of hedgerows, urbanisation, the native habitat of bees being impeached upon by man. But let's have a focus on these chemicals to start off with. So I did a little bit of reading, and apparently there's a particular chemical called neonicotinoids, and they're an issue. I then thought, well, actually, do you know what? I want to know what the extent of the decline is first before I go much further. So these, and I don't really know that. What's happening in the bee population? Is it the same around the world? Has there already been an impact on food production? Because although I don't know the answers to those questions, I do know that there's a relationship between bees and food. Bees pollinate our food. So this is me just getting out of my brain what I already know. So the consequences, I'm assuming, would be economic and food production. So I know a bit, but I need to know some more, and I need to do some reading. So let's have a look. I did a little bit of reading. So these chemicals, these neonicotinoids, apparently they suppress the immune system of bees. So that's one way in which they affect the bees. Do they always result in the reduction of bees wherever they're used in the world? Well, apparently they use them extensively in Australia or Canada, but they don't appear to be having the same colony collapse disorder as they are in other parts of the world. So are these the sole cause of the colony collapse, or is there something else going on? Well, apparently there are viral pathogens and parasitic mites. So if you think, well, okay, if those exist, these parasites and pathogens, the viruses, bees get viruses the same as humans, are there, and these neonicotinoids are suppressing the immune system, maybe the bees aren't as effective at fighting off the parasites as they were before. Perhaps they don't have as many viral pathogens and parasitic mites in Australia and Canada, and maybe that's why they're not as affected there. So I'm going to have to do some more reading around that, and I might need to do a bit more reading about what this colony collapse disorder actually is. So I've got some ideas then about what might be causing the problem, and I need to do some more reading there, so that's going on my reading list. But let's have a look at the issue of consequences then. So the majority of the planet's 100 most important food crops depend on insect pollination. Okay, so if we lose our bees, we lose our food. Pretty big consequence. But Martin Smith, he's the president of the British Beekeepers Association, and he was talking about how the United Nations has recognised the importance of managed honeybees. They contribute 153 billion to the global food production, so there's an economic consequence here. But maybe these managed bees are our solution. If we can manage bees, if we can farm bees, we can keep them away from the neonicotinoids, we can keep them away from pathogens and parasites, perhaps. Would that be solving our problem? Well, apparently a recent international study found of 41 crop systems on 6 continents that wild bees are important to their pollinization. If we rely solely on domesticated honeybees, we could ultimately put these crops at risk. That's from E. Grossman, Yale University. So, okay, we've got 2 different ideas. Managed farm bees, the importance of wild bees. So 2 different opinions. I need to do some more research around that. Plus, Martin Smith, he is the president of the British Beekeepers Association. Perhaps he has some vested interest in managed bees. There might be some bias as to his opinion, and I'd need to get a more rounded understanding of that whole issue. But I'm starting to see ideas, relationships between ideas, and I'm also starting to see where I need to do more reading. So, what do we do next? What comes next? Reading and research. What do I know already? What do I need to know? Where's my evidence? And where's my discussion? I was starting to get a bit of a discussion between the farmed bees and the wild bees. I was starting to get some nuances between areas in the world where these neonicotinoids are having a big impact and areas where they're used but they're not having as much of an impact. So there's ways in which I can go, and I could see that visually, and I could plot that out visually, and I was creating a map for myself to go forward.